Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and we're close to halfway through. We're not maybe a third of the way through our full day of keynotes and regular sessions for the Learning Revolution Conference. We had 3 very fun nights of pre-conference keynotes. It's really fun to have Stephanie Sandifer here. Stephanie, you and I actually, in web terms, go way back.
Yes.
That have taken place. Hey, thanks to ClassFlow for supporting this event and the one next week, our Reinventing the Classroom event. And thanks to Blackboard Collaborate for being such a great platform for this kind of activity. So this is quite a small crowd. Those of you who are here, okay, let's see if I can guess. I know we've got Thailand, I know we've got India. Ahmad and Dave, I'm not sure I know where you are, but look for the star to the left of the map and then click on the map. Stephanie, you're in Texas, right?
Right.
Well, thank you, Shambles and Peters, for making this an international event. And for those of you who are listening to the recording, thanks for taking the time to do so. Stephanie, I'm going to turn the time over to you, and like I said, I'll be here to support you. And then okay. You may have to yell for me as I prepare the next set of session rooms, but I will keep the room open.
Okay, great. Good morning or good evening, everyone, whatever time it is in your area. My name is Stephanie Sandifer, and my contact information is down here at the bottom of the slide. I've got it on the next slide as well. But I just want to thank Steve again for this opportunity to talk about this project that I've been involved with for a little more than 2 years now. And this is actually my first opportunity to speak formally about it. I do want to apologize quickly for if it's distracting, I'll turn off the video, but now that I'm talking, one of my dogs has decided to come in the room. So hopefully he'll settle down when he realizes that I'm not going to interact with him. Anyway, this is my very first opportunity to talk about this beyond having informal conversations with friends and colleagues at conferences or around town as I meet with folks. So this is about combining community resources with emerging technologies and mobile technologies and all of these great and wonderful things that we talk about in education that we try to layer onto the traditional setting. And what I hope to show you today is an idea, one idea. There are many different ways that you can do this, but one idea that we have envisioned here in Houston for breaking out of the traditional paradigm. So who am I? For those of you that don't know, I know a few of you in the audience. Hi, Peggy. Good to see you in here. If you don't know me, this is where you can find me online. Twitter is probably one of the best places to touch base with me. So there's my Twitter handle. StephanieSandifer.com is my website, and my blog is at ed421.com. I'm an educator. We were having that conversation right before the session started. I do a lot of different things, but educator is kind of like the umbrella term that defines everything I do. And I've started to think about the term learning designer as well, because I do some freelance work in addition to teaching online. I did work for just over 10 years in Houston Independent School District as an educator and an administrator in a very traditional setting. But throughout my entire career in education, arts, technology, and trying to be as innovative as possible have been woven into everything that I do. Even when I worked in administration, I worked as a literacy coach for a few years. I've taught face-to-face at the college level, and now that I teach online, I'm teaching at the college level, and very soon in an innovative high school that is going to be a global online high school. So all that feeds and informs what I do now. But the other big thing that I don't want to, I've got it listed last, but it's probably one of the most important things that feeds my work as an educator now, is that I'm a mom of 3 young children. And that experience over the past 5.5 or 6 years, gosh, they're so old now, that experience has transformed my thinking about how children learn and how we all learn, because I've seen a different side of that than what I saw in the classroom with teenagers and young adults. And for the past 3 years, my children have been enrolled in a public Montessori school, and that's also had a major impact on the work that I do in every way. And you'll see it reflected in this project. So the school that I'm going to talk about is coming up. I see the question. I'll give you that. Oh, the name of the high school. One World School. So that's not the point of this, but if you're curious, touch base with me on Twitter and I can tell you more about that. So the guiding question for this presentation, this session, and I'm going to try to get through as much information as I can about the school and then stop and give you time to talk, because I think it's really critical that we discuss how this can be envisioned in other communities. But how can we combine mobile technologies and emerging technologies with the rich community and cultural resources that we are all surrounded with to remove the walls that separate school from community, which hopefully leads to a transformation of the learning experience into a much more personalized and engaging learning experience for students that improves academic and social outcomes. And I don't say academic in terms of test scores. If you know me, you know that I'm like just really, for me, academic and social growth means so much more than just what does the test score look like. Unfortunately, we live in a reality where that's how things are measured, but I hope soon we can swing that pendulum back the other way and move beyond that. And the other key point, or key part of this question, is removing the walls. And I don't mean removing the walls in the sense of just simply opening up networks to kids and giving them access to social media and removing virtually the walls of the classroom. I mean literally, how can we remove the walls? So think about in terms of, if you woke up tomorrow and all the school buildings in your community were gone, where would kids learn? How would they learn? What would that experience begin to look like if those structures that we've come to know for over 100 years now, that typical traditional school structure was gone, no longer existed in your community, what could it look like? So back in, let's see, it's 2014 now, so back in 2011, 2012, I was asked to join Houston A+ Challenge, which is an amazing nonprofit here in Houston. And they do a lot of work around instructional practice and coaching around instructional practice and coaching around leadership and creating these cohorts of learners, professional learners across the Houston community. And I've been involved with them while I worked in HISD in Houston Independent School District, going through some of their cohorts. And they wanted to bring me on as a technology coach, even just part-time. And I needed a very flexible work environment because with 3 young children, that was just, it wasn't possible for me to go back into a full-time position at that time. So they said, look, give us some of your time, come in as a technology coach, help us with some of the projects that we've got going on, and I did. And about 1.5 years into that, my boss called me up one day and he said, are you sitting down? And I said, sure. And he goes, I've got this idea and I want you to figure it out. And I said, okay, what's your idea? And he said, I want to put a school in the middle of the museum district, but I don't want any books, I don't want any classrooms, I don't want anything traditional. Is it possible with technology where it is right now and resources that are available online for free, and he was thinking in terms of like OER, what's possible? Figure it out, let's talk. And so for the next 18 months, he and I and a few other people, including Will Richardson, who came on as an advisor, worked on this. And this time last year, we're in April now, right? This time, SLA was definitely one of our Chris Lehman and I are good friends, and that was one of the influential resources that we looked at. So this time last year, we weren't really sure the school was going to go, just because this was really hard to put together. But it launched in August. And so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the school, how we got it going, and what are the implications for this, where the future, where the school's going, and then I'm going to open this up to have greater dialogue around how everyone can look at their own communities and figure out something that works like this. It's personalized, extremely personalized, museum-based, technology-infused, very blended, very connected, very flexible, very agile learning experience for the kids and for the learning coaches. We renamed teachers to learning coaches. It's highly relevant. It's mastery-based and student-driven. So it's not just student-centered, but it's student-driven. And let's see, I'm getting an alert on my computer about updates. Okay. So what prompted this, of course, was looking at the problems. So I said about a year and a half into my work at Houston A+ Challenge, my boss called me up. And Maureen, hold that question, and I'll come back to that about the TEKS and all of that. So for about a year and a half, one of the things that I was doing was going into the schools that we work with across the Houston district and kind of putting together a state of the schools in terms of innovation and technology. And there were very low levels of that. And where we saw technology in use, it was layered on. And quite literally, there were some schools that I went into that just broke my heart because there was no technology available for students to use. I remember going into one lab that, and this was just a couple of years ago, it had the blue Bondi iMacs, and then the PCs that were in the room were ancient as well. And I looked at the person that I was standing there with, who was a faculty member at the school, and I said, "Do those work?" And they said, "Yeah, they're very slow, though." So, you know, that was the reality of what we were looking at in Houston. And then, of course, the instructional methods as well. As a technology coach, when I talked to people about the possibility of even attempting something like flipped learning, the receptiveness to that was very, very low. And people just couldn't see past it. You know, there's a question there Maureen is asking, do you have to deal with TEKS stuff and testing? And that was the big pushback, was, well, I don't have time to do anything innovative because I've got to teach this curriculum. We've got to focus on the test. Everybody's got to be on the same page at the same day. Everybody in the algebra classroom has to be doing the exact same thing in the book on the exact same day at the exact same moment. And then, of course, we had policies. We still have policies in place that prevent true innovation that we've got to work through. We've got to get beyond this idea of seat time and age-based grade levels if we really want to innovate and we really want to reach true personalization. So we came together, we looked at the situation, we looked at the state of the schools currently, and we said there's different options. There's two major options. There's one, there's fine-tune and tweak, and we've got a lot of examples out there of schools that are fine-tuning and tweaking within the traditional paradigm. Or we can innovate. And we chose to innovate, right? We chose to completely blow up the model, to revisit, challenge, reimagine our very most basic assumptions about what school should be, how it should look, where it should be located, how everything should operate. And I literally mean everything. With A+ Up, we started to look at the role of the teacher, how that can be transformed, how that changes. I had recently, last week, I sat down with one of the learning coaches at the school and had a great conversation with her, and we talked about that. And I'll mention some of that a little bit later on. Relationships, not just between the teacher or the learning coach and the learners, but between the learners themselves and also the parents, looking at the composition of a learning team that consisted of the learning coaches, the parents, and the learners, and then other community members, so the people that we're interacting with in the museum district. Reimagining the idea of school as a place, reimagining the learning process versus learning as an end product, and of course ownership, who owns the learning, who drives the learning, where does it belong, and the entire system itself. This model that we've created with A+ Up also challenges the notion of what budgets and funding should look like. Almost all of the budget for the school goes into teacher salaries. There's very little overhead. And that's reliant on the building of strong relationships between the families, the learners, and the learning coach. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Quick time check, make sure I'm on here. So the goals for the school. And this was, back last summer when we were getting ready to launch. We said, okay, let's aim for. Well, first of all, we knew we bring these kids in. We were identifying 6th graders because we wanted this to be a middle school. We're going to start with. And I hate to say that because just a few minutes ago I said age-based grade levels we need to get rid of, right? But the system that we currently have has kids placed in grades by age level. So we said let's target 6th grade because middle school, and I don't have time to go into all the research behind this, but the Houston A+ Challenge focuses on middle schools because of the research that says this is where kids drop off. So we said let's target 6th graders. Whatever they are, whatever level they're at, but they're going to be labeled 6th graders when they come in because that's where they're coming from a traditional system where they're labeled as 6th graders in the system. And we have to promise that we'll keep them there till 8th grade, and then we've got a lot of options for high schools across the Houston district that are really interesting and engaging. But we wanted to move them 4.5 years in that 3-year span, right? So we wanted to be able to do better than most of us are like, okay, if we can get the kid to move 1 year's growth in 1 year, then great, we're doing our job. And we looked at this model and we said, what we're trying to put into place here can help kids advance at a faster pace, regardless of where they start. So 4.5 years in 3. We wanted to create problem solvers. We wanted to focus on character. We wanted to create young community members. And this is where some of the influence of Montessori comes in, this idea of helping children at a young age understand their place in community. And that goes back to that, how do we take down those walls? Because we've done a great job of siloing education and learning into this one building, when it should be happening everywhere. And kids should see themselves, even at a young age, as part of the community. And we wanted to build their communication skills, which comes about through all of those other things. But another goal is we also wanted to create a model that would inspire others to reimagine the system for learning that we have in all of our communities, and to spark the creation of many more innovative learning environments everywhere. Not necessarily more A+ ups, but schools that are inspired by this, much in the same way that we were inspired by SLA and a number of other schools. So, this is A+ up, and I wanted to show you this slide again so you can get the URLs, because I can talk about A+ up, but if you have in-depth questions or you're coming to the Houston area and you'd like to visit, you would want to contact somebody at HoustonAplus.org. So that's the second URL there. This is a map of the Houston Museum District. Home base for A+ Up is right here at the Health Museum down in the lower right-hand corner. What you don't see on this map, so you see this great big green area. This is Herman Park. A lot of great stuff in Herman Park. But if you keep going south of that map, you hit the Houston Zoo. So that's one of our partners. And then to the left over here, the yellow area in the lower, that's Rice University. And then if you keep going down Main Street here, you hit the Houston Medical Center, which is huge. And through our partnership with the Health Museum, there is talk of eventually trying to get kids to talk to leading surgeons and to see some of the innovative stuff that's happening in the medical center, which is amazing. Additionally, on Main Street there is the Metro Rail that runs all the way from below the medical center all the way to downtown Houston, and the kids are hopping on that on a frequent basis. And I've got some pictures, and I'll talk a little bit about what they're doing when they do that. That's really interesting. So home base is right down here in the right-hand corner, and then you've got the museums and organizations here that are partnered with us. But really the campus is the entire city of Houston itself. So kids are moving out beyond this home base area and learning wherever, whenever, whatever makes sense for them. So here's the home base. And this leads to another question of what happens at the intersection of this mobile blended personalized learning environment and the meaningful use of community resources. So here are some numbers. What does the school look like? How did we get here? Who are the students? This is an image of the students. What is happening in this picture is one group of students is explaining to another group of students their analysis, interpretation of this artwork. So what does the school look like? I know some of these numbers might be a little different now. This was at the beginning of the school year. So 0 school walls, at least 82 aligned online resources, including OER, 2 very motivated learning coaches, and they're fantastic teachers. They were really strong. One was a literacy coach, one was a math coach. And they had been teachers in the system, and then they moved into A+ as literacy and literacy and numeracy coaches, and then we pulled them into this project. 6 museum partners, 4 student learning outcomes, 1 online learning platform. They're using Edmodo. I know that question will come up. 45 Acer Aspire Chromebook laptops. And then, of course, they're focusing on 7 character traits throughout everything that they're learning. And who are our students? This is great. So the school itself is open enrollment, open application, open enrollment. It is a private school, but we were able to secure funding at least for the first couple of years so that the students are not paying tuition. But, when I talk about the future, I'll talk about the plans that eventually we want to become, the school wants to establish a charter in the state of Texas so that it can be a free open enrollment public charter school. But when they went through all the applications for the students, they wanted to make sure that the student body, that the demographics that you see here match the city of Houston. So we looked at the demographics of Houston and matched to that. So notice the composition of boys and girls, composition of the different races, and then of course the mixture of high SES and low SES. So when you look at what the students are doing and I talk to you about what they're doing, don't think that we have a bunch of kids who would qualify for a magnet school in this school. Some of them certainly would. Now, one thing they do all have in common, obviously, as in any situation where you have a school like this that is not the zoned homeschool for the child, obviously there are motivated parents involved, right? They're motivated parents who saw this opportunity and said, yes, I want to apply. I want my child to be in that school. And that is something to consider. But hopefully, again, like I said, we want to inspire everyone to look at ways to innovate in their schools so that you could start to see this type of innovation in zoned schools as well. So their learning environment is the museums. They're learning among the artifacts. In this case, if you're studying history, it makes sense. Go find the gallery that has the artifacts from that period in history and sit in there and talk about that history. Understand how those artifacts connect you with these cultures, these different cultures and civilizations you're studying about. They're also looking at artwork. They're looking at it, analyzing it, honing their skills in observation and seeing and in analysis. So this can be applied in other places beyond just looking at artwork, which is great. And again, my background is in art, so I love this, but at the same point in time, as someone who's moved on from just being focused on art to focusing on literacy and leadership issues and technology and innovation, there's so many different ways that we can use these skills of observation. And some of the museums, do have actual artifacts that the kids can handle. So we think of museums as places where you just go and you look and you don't touch. There are things available that they can handle and they can touch and explore, so they can investigate artifacts from different cultures. And they have the opportunity to make art as well. And because they are in the museum district, and the museums are always bringing in guest speakers or having artists who are visiting for various functions. This is just one of many pictures that I have of some of the guest speakers that have visited with the students. I mentioned that they get on the metro rail, they head downtown, they learn anywhere, in coffee shops, in cafes, learning with anything available. In this particular case, I think they were in a coffee shop, and this young woman was doing some math. She was studying circumference and diameter with just the coffee cups. Herman Park, which I pointed out on the map, is where they go and do their what they refer to as wellness. So as long as the weather's nice, and usually here in Houston it is. We get a little bit hot, starting to get hot this week, unfortunately. But they go out here and they exercise. They also go over to Rice University and use the facilities there. They go for a run, and then they can just sit down on the sidewalk anywhere and talk and learn together. They also participate in service learning in the home base. So we do have a classroom dedicated to us in the Health Museum that they do use as home base. But obviously, from what you can see with these pictures, they don't stay there. But they engage in group discussions. They do independent work, and there you can see that they are one-to-one. They collaborate. In this picture, and we have a student who was Skyped in because he was at home sick, and they had a guest speaker that day, so he Skypes in for that. They also get one-on-one support when they need it, as soon as they need it, at the moment they need it, not in a scheduled tutorial session at the end of the day or summer school or whatever. It's learning when they need it. That idea of personalization that students learn just in time. They also work on their presentation skills. They are truly becoming a community of learners that are learning within and throughout the community. And it's great. It's very exciting. So what inspired us? I talked about, and someone mentioned it in the chat, and I'm not seeing everything that's in the chat. So again, I'm going to have some Q&A time in just a little while. So if I didn't mention your question, please bring it up again. Science Leadership Academy, the idea of Homago and connected learning that you see from DML. So Homago is hanging out, messing around, and geeking out. Dr. Sugita Mitra's soul concept, and this was last week. I took this picture last Wednesday, actually. Houston A+ Challenge brought in Dr. Mitra for a guest speaker series that they do every year. And this was some of the students from the school. So that auditorium was filled with people during his presentation, and I just got an email. I'll put it, I'll give it to Steve or something, or I'll put it on there's actually a wiki page for this session that I put together that just has the slideshow. That's on the description for this session on the Learning Revolution website. So if you go to that, you'll see a link at the bottom that will take you to that wiki page. I'll put the link there because they posted on YouTube his talk that he gave to the audience here in Houston. And what you won't see, though, is what happened after the talk. The kids got to meet him, and he spent about 30 minutes just sitting chatting with the kids afterwards. And we had prepped the kids, or the learning teachers had prepped the kids to let them know that what he was going to talk about in the session or in the presentation was one of the things that that inspired or that influenced the design for the school. And of course, I've mentioned Montessori and Dewey. There's constructivism, connectivism. There's inquiry-based learning going on. It's definitely it's not just student-centered; it's student-driven, and you'll see an example of that in a minute. But also, I want to go back to Dewey just for a second because there was a lot of influence on Dewey's 3 tenets of individualism, readiness, and pragmatism, which that's all part of Montessori as well. We know that Montessori and Dewey were definitely in alignment with each other. So the partnerships, I want to talk about that real quick. And then when I do this, I want to talk about one of the surprises that came up to me as we were doing this, and we spent months going out and meeting with folks at these museums to develop these partnerships. And we encountered some challenges. One of the biggest challenges we hit when we started playing around with this concept was, okay, where are the kids going to be every single day? And one of the things we ran into is that a lot of museums are closed on Mondays. Museum hours usually don't begin until 9 or 10 a.m., So if you're looking at a situation where parents have to drop off kids by 8 because they have to go to work and the kids have to be somewhere, where are we putting those kids? Where are they meeting? And the Health Museum really came to our rescue on that once we finally met with them. They were one of the last museums that we met with because we were really struggling with the receptiveness to this. We had a champion at the Museum of Fine Arts. The education coordinator was gung-ho about this as soon as we talked to her. She even organized a meeting of all the education coordinators from all the other museums to meet with us to talk about the idea. And then shortly after that, she accepted another position outside of Houston. But her replacement was very enthusiastic about this, and they are one of our major partners because of their enthusiasm. But some of the organizations had concerns about, well, certainly we had concerns about hours and use of facilities, and they did as well because their facilities are always in use during their operating hours. Especially during the school year, they have lots of field trips. One of the museums averages about 500,000 kids per year on their campus for field trips. And that averages out to about 2,000 to 5,000 per day in that building. And the others ranged somewhere in there. So, we had to think about, we've got this small, tiny cohort of 40 kids. Certainly we wouldn't be taking up much of your space, but they are very locked into a mindset of, or a revenue model that depends on field trips and renting of spaces, paying to take classes that they offer. So very traditional, and memberships. So very traditional revenue models there. And we were asking them to rethink some of that and to say, trading off this, how long are the kids at the museum for a field trip? What are they really experiencing while they're there, as opposed to 40 kids who are embedded in there and learning in there all the time. So that took a lot of relationship building, and we weren't necessarily successful with everyone immediately, but we're hoping that with some proven success, we can convince more partners to come on board and say, yes, we want to be a part of this because this is amazing. So a lot of things to think about. One of the things that went through my head, because I'm focusing on some of the technology end of this as we're designing it, was how are we actually going to do blended and connected learning when we don't necessarily have Wi-Fi everywhere? So we were looking at options like, well, we're going to get little mobile hotspots and throw them in the backpack of the learning coaches, and then the kids will just be connecting to that mobile hotspot. And then when we went out and met with all of our partners, one of the really great surprises for me was that almost everyone had, within the past year, had beefed up Wi-Fi, and nearly every single one of our partners has Wi-Fi all over their site. The zoo doesn't, but they've got certain areas that do have hotspots. And everyone was more than happy to say, yeah, absolutely, the kids can connect to that and access that. So I mentioned open application and enrollment. So for the first year, we had 118 total applicants. Our learning coaches spent 62 hours on the phone doing interviews, and then 128 hours with home visits, meeting with the families to ensure that they were committed to this idea as well. Because this model blows up the traditional model, there were things that we didn't have in place, like transportation. So parents had to be committed enough to be able to get the kids to and from the school. We ended up with 40 students enrolled, and I think that number dropped down by a couple since then. And I'll talk again. I'll go into the future of the school in a few minutes and talk about plans for expansion, because there are. But before I do that, and if somebody help me out here, if you recognize this, this is one of those images that you just find on your desktop, on your computer, and you're like, that's exactly, this is it. And I can't remember, some point in the recent past, I got this from somewhere, I don't remember where. I know it's Harvard Graduate School of Education, possibly, but if somebody knows the link to this, awesome. Anyway, the point of putting this in here is that all the elements that I'm talking about for this for A+ Up are represented somewhere in this image. And so these elements theoretically need to increased engagement, increased ownership, and meaningful progress. So not just higher test scores, but meaningful academic progress, right? So is that actually happening at A+ Up? Well, one thing, and I mentioned this earlier, that's a very flexible design, and this was designed when we were designing the school. One of the things I kept emphasizing was, let's not get locked into the design. Let's design a baseline or a foundation model that can be flexible, that can be agile, that can change as needed, because it's going to have to, if we don't build that in, then we're just replicating a traditional system that doesn't flex and doesn't change as needed for the learners. So it's very agile, and what's happened is the students really have taken ownership. They've become co-creators in the learning, and the image that you see over on the right-hand side of this is a scholarcraft. They basically have decided they wanted to gamify their learning, and the learning coaches said, all right, let's do it. So they're calling it Scholarcraft instead of Minecraft. And so they're identifying, here are our 7 character traits, here are our daily routines, here's our units of study, and I don't think Will's not in here, is he? Will would appreciate the fact that one of their units of study down at the bottom is why school. They're tracking their progress, right? I love this image. 4 big gains they've spent, and this was put together in January or February. So this is like halfway through the year. 326 hours on Rosetta Stone, 261 books finished, 17% increase in their typing accuracy, 15 months of progress in mathematics, and I'm going to talk about that again in a minute. Big moves, 68 miles of walk, 46 flash mob dance moves, 8 trips on the metro rail, 62 active family members, and 7 community partners. I love this one, 0 worksheets. Absolutely 0 worksheets. Again, and here I'll take a moment just to talk about the technology issue. I spent hours walking around the museums with multiple devices, trying to see which ones seem to be most effective at reaching, or at accessing Wi-Fi and reaching some of the resources we knew we wanted to use. And the decision was finally settled on Chromebooks. So they got those Acer Aspire books. But they use kind of like the foundational pieces or Edmodo and Google Docs or Google Drive. And they have a Google Apps account for the school. But then they also use anything and everything. Lots of OER. They use Khan Academy where it's appropriate, where they need it. But basically, the tools they use the most are those open-ended tools that can be used for creation and collaboration and communication. And that was one of the big hurdles that we ran across when we were trying to describe this concept to people, because a lot of people were like, oh, well, what are you going to buy? What math software or programs, and what literacy programs, and what, there's this mindset of, if we're going to use technology, then we are buying a program. We're buying something that the kids are just going to log on to and go through every day. And they're going to be mindless little drones stuck with their face in the computer. And we were trying to explain to them that that's not what we're going to do. Now, they did have to get one little prepackaged thing for math just to kind of ease concerns of the parents. But they're not using that as much. You saw that some of the pictures there, and I've got another great picture that I didn't include of them out in Herman Park using measuring tape to measure off the distance of a football field and use that in some math calculations that they were doing, so they could get a sense of space as well as the actual numbers behind it. So let's talk about this math thing for a second. I saw this chart in March. I was at South by Southwest Edu and ran into the executive director of A+ Up, my boss, the one who had called me up and said, hey, I've got this great idea, are you sitting down? And so we're at South by Southwest Edu and we're talking about the school, and he's giving me updates, because now I serve on the advisory board for the school. I'm no longer directly involved with the school. I should mention at the beginning, and I forgot to. I apologize for that, but for personal reasons, I had to pull away from working as many hours. So we hired on a new technology coach who's fantastic, and she can work full-time for them and be there embedded with the kids all day long. And I serve as an advisory member. But anyway, so he shows me this data, right? And they're using, and I can't remember the name of it, but I can find it if you really want to know, something that the kids can just kind of log in and do these little assessments to track their math progress. So they did a benchmark at the beginning of the year, and again, I told you the kids were labeled 6th grade. A lot of them were functioning at the 4th grade level in math, so we knew we had a lot of work to do. By January, and by January they had taken about 4 of these little assessments with this program. So what you see here, each of these red bars is an individual student, and you can see that about 2 of the students progressed a half of a year, or 3 of the students. 3 of the students progressed about a half of a year from August to January, or to February. That's expected. Another group of about 6 or so progressed a year in a half a year's time. Then you start getting into students who progressed, 5 or 6 progressed a year and a half in just a half a year's time. And then we start getting into kids who progressed 2 years in a half a year, 3 years in a half a year. Amazing. There was some other data that I saw that actually showed the grade level they started at and where they were in January. And one of these kids down here started at the 4th grade level, and by January or February he was performing at the 7th grade level. And yeah, Peggy, they're not teaching to the test. They are. The school director did do he did get certified to administer the STAR test, which is the annual standardized test that we do here in Texas. And sometime this week or next week, I can't remember, maybe they're doing it this week, they're going to take the STAR. But I asked the learning coach last week, I said, yeah, are you talking about it to him? She's like, no, we're not talking to him about the STAR at all. They're just going to take it. We're not worried about it. We're going to focus on what we're learning, and we're not going to worry about the test. And so they're going to take it, and it's just going to be whatever. Again, because they're private, they don't have to be measured by that, but they want to measure themselves by that and just to see comparison of how they're doing compared to the public school. So the key elements to this: mobile and blended, connected, personalized, it's embedded within the community, student-driven, mastery-based, flexible and agile. But the important thing about all those elements is that they all come together. They blend together to create a very unique and transformative learning experience for everyone involved, not just for the students, but for the parents and for the educators involved as well. And I asked the learning coach when I met with her last week, I said, what does it mean for you as a teacher now? You know, you worked in the traditional system for years. You're a veteran teacher. Now you're working in this environment. What does this mean for you? And she just said, you know, one of the things I've learned is that I don't know anything. Because she works at the middle school level. Yes, the question, yes, it's student-directed, student-driven. They are co-creating the learning experience as they go with their teachers. But so, and she said that, you know, that she's running into things that she just doesn't know, and she's realized it's perfectly okay to tell the students, I don't know, let's figure that out together, rather than trying to fake her way through it. So the future of the school, we'd like to inspire replication of some of these elements or in other communities. The school does want to expand. In fact, there are plans now. They've identified 2 additional learning coaches. They're going to start recruiting students, and they're partnering with another community partner. The new cohort won't necessarily be based in the museum district like this one is, but they're going to do whatever they can to tie it in as much as possible. They are working on a charter school application so that it can be completely free and we don't have to worry about the funding and getting people to donate to fund the school right now. There is the intent and the hope that elements of this can expand to or spread to existing public schools so that you can start to see more innovation in the public schools that do serve every single one of the kids here in Houston, or most of the students here in Houston. And then it's teacher prep. One of the challenges in finding learning coaches was finding people who could embrace this model. And in too many instances, we've got young teachers coming out of our teacher prep programs who aren't ready to teach in such a model. So we are hoping to become a place to partner with one of the universities and become a place where teachers can come do their student teaching. and learn in this environment, so that as the the public schools start to move more in this direction, and then they start to get teachers who are ready for it, rather than having to train them. But again, the ultimate goal in all of this, and you can see from this idea of replication, expansion, spreading to other schools, and teacher prep, is not to transform the educational experiences just for a few hundred students, but for thousands or more everywhere. So going back to that guiding question, how do we combine mobile and emerging technologies with community and cultural resources to remove the walls that separate school from community and transform this learning experience for everyone with improved outcomes for everyone? What I'd like to do now is take just a couple of minutes to allow you some time in the chat to think about these questions. So what ideas in this most resonate with you? How could you do something like this in your community? What are some of the the rich community resources that could serve as a launch pad for reimagining school in your city, your town, your region? And as you do that, I'm going to kind of be scanning here to see if I can catch on some of these questions, and then we'll go into more Q&A with everyone. Let's see. Okay, let me go back up. And again, if I missed your question, I do apologize. This is challenging to try to go back through the chat. But if you had something in there that you definitely wanted me to answer, go ahead and post it again. But what a great chat. Peggy, am I going to write a book about it? Maybe. Got a lot of other things on my plate right now. Let's see. Yes, we have a great museum district in Houston. Yes, you heard Chromebooks. And someone's mentioning, the idea of the motivated parents, getting kids to go to school if it's not a neighborhood school. We've already got a lot of inquiries from people who've heard about what's going on this year, who want to get their kids in for next year. So the interest is growing. At this point, it's just going to get that charter grant in, or application in, so that we can expand without having to worry about the money as much. And then virtual field trips to the museum. These students don't have to do that because they're there. But I'm working on a project that might do some virtual field trips to a few of the museums. So Peggy, touch base with me individually on that, either through Twitter or something, and I'll talk to you more about that, because it's not related to this school. Okay. Okay, yeah. So right now there's not a plan to do virtual field trips. I see the question came up again. But that's a great idea, and there's some possibilities around that. I would just need to kind of chat with folks and see if they're interested in doing that. How might this work in a rural environment? That's a good question. I've thought about that myself, and I think, so I grew up in a small town, but that doesn't have, obviously doesn't have this huge museum district, but it does have some resources. And again, literally think outside of the box. Think outside of go back, okay, so think about your rural community or your small town, and again, go back to that question I threw out at the beginning. You wake up one morning, or the scenario that I mentioned, you wake up one morning and all the schools are gone. Where are those kids going to learn? How are they going to learn? What are they going to learn about? How are you going to teach them about all of the subject matter in that environment that you have? And that takes a lot of creative thinking if you don't have a museum district like Houston does, but it's not impossible. There are ways to do that, or to do some of this. And yeah, absolutely. See, that was one of the motivating. So Peggy says first step is probably learn more about the community resources we have available. Absolutely. That was one of the key motivators for me, was the realization that our community resources too often do go unused, or not as utilized as much as they could be. Suspect the model would frighten most teachers around the world. Again, I mentioned some things here that threw people off, right? Well, what software package are you going to buy? Where are the kids where are they going to be? this takes a lot of thinking outside of the box. It takes a lot of motivation on the part of the people trying to put this school together to counter those concerns. Let's see if there's any other questions. So, yeah, exactly. Health and safety of the students. One of the things I mentioned was the importance of the relationships that are built. So if students get sick, they're right there with their learning coach, and the learning coach has the parents' cell phone numbers with them, so they can call the parents right away and say, they don't go to the office and sit with the school nurse. They just immediately contact the parents and say, so-and-so's just threw up and is running a fever or whatever, and they deal with it in that way. It's not what you have in the traditional environment, but at the same point in time, they've built relationships and they have trust, and they know that if do the students have smartphones? I don't know for sure that every single one of them do, but I'm pretty certain that they do. That isn't something that we've talked about extensively in terms of like how things are going with the model, but or with the school. But I'm sure that most of them do have some sort of smartphone. That is most of the students that I see around Houston at middle school and up tend to have something on them throughout the day. So, so that's how they handle situations like that. Okay, so I'll just pop this one up there. We've got about 5 to 7 more minutes. Any other questions? And Steve, if Steve's available, I don't know if he wants to allow people to open up the mic, or if you can just post your questions in the chat. And again, I tried to go back through the chat, but if you had a pressing question, an urgent question, and I missed it, feel free to post it in the chat again, and I will try to get to it. Yes, thank you. I think it is amazing and breathtaking as well. I was hopeful that it would be successful, and again, there's still, we've still got a long way to go to say that we were expanding and still remaining successful and sustainable. But if we can get the charter, then it's very sustainable. Do the students become proficient at being, actually, the Holocaust Museum expressed interest in actually having the students act as docents during the day. And we've also, I think that has also been brought up with MFAH. They have not reached that point where they're doing that yet, but that is the intention, that they could learn to do that. Yes, absolutely. Can this work with elementary age? We didn't talk about that because we're so focused. Houston A+ has been so focused on middle school at this point. I think there would be some concerns with younger children in terms of all of the roaming around that they do, hopping on the. They talked. I talked to the learning coach last week. She said, one day they took them on the metro rail, and before they did, they say, when we get on the rail, I want you to just start talking to random strangers and ask them how the day is going, what they do for a living, things like that, trying to get the students to learn to talk to strangers. You certainly wouldn't be doing that with younger children, but so many of the elements of this that are inspired by learning models that do work with younger children, like Montessori, and the school that my kids go to, there's some really fantastic teachers there who are really interested in integrating more technology into the learning environment. So you would have more of a mix of Montessori and the technology. And they do things on the campus, like all the classrooms have their own gardens where the kids do practical things like grow vegetables and fruits and vegetables and things like that. So you can do things like this at an elementary level, but it wouldn't look the same. And again, it doesn't have to look the same. The idea behind this is like, how can we inspire each other to think outside of the box and create more innovation, but not necessarily the exact same thing everywhere. Let's see. Not to talk to strangers, absolutely. What an incredible learning environment, like a Montessori high school. Yeah, Peggy, I can't say much right now, but I'm also just joined an exploratory committee to look at the possibilities of a public Montessori high school in Houston. So maybe that'll be my next keynote. That's actually a few years down the road, but definitely. Since Houston seen as a safe city, somewhat, it has its dangers, but again, the students are never off by themselves. They always have an adult with them in their group. So, and again, it's because of those relationships. The parents totally trust that learning coach because they know them. They started with those home visits, and the relationships grew from there. And I think Steve mentioned that the mics were open if anybody would like to express a question through the mic rather than typing in questions. And did I hit all of the questions in the chat? I'm trying to go back through this. I think so. I think I got them all. Okay, so yes. Question? Someone raised their hand. Yes. Feel free to. I think he opened up the mic. So all you have to do is touch the talk button. I'm not hearing anything. You might need to check. Yeah, we're not hearing you. So you might want to check your audio settings. I am not sure where that link is. Oh, under Tools. I think you go under Tools to Audio, and then do Audio Setup Wizard, and that will help you make sure you've got the right mic on. And while you're doing that, because we still have a couple of minutes, do you answer? Oh, okay, so Common Core is not adopted in Texas. So, but at the same point in time when we were designing the school, that did come up, and we did say, you know, that we need to be sure that we are somewhat in alignment with that, because that will come up, and obviously it's coming up in this question, the issue of Common Core. Texas has its own set of standards, the TEKS, and that was primarily what we focused on. Obviously, you know, with the STAR test coming up, that's based on the TEKS. So it wasn't a big concern, but it was, you know, there's an awareness of it among the learning team. And so did the young man from Ichicon who designed all the How to Get Around Philly design a how-to get around Houston? Oh, no, he did not, but yeah, that would be excellent, especially since we have one metro rail that goes from one place to the other, and we don't have any other rail built out, unfortunately. And we have a bus system, but that would, you know, that'd be absolutely wonderful if we had a better solution for getting around Houston other than everybody getting in their big cars and driving around. We're a car city. Okay, so comments had to go. Any other questions? We've got a couple minutes left. And again, you know, if you have much more specific questions about the school itself, the best people to talk to are the people at Houston A+ Challenge. They can get you in touch with the learning coaches or the school director. And I'm happy to talk to you about, you know, the things that I did on my end as designer of the school, and my involvement since then as an advisory member or advisory board member. Thank you all so much. This was fun. I really enjoyed talking about this. I hope my passion for it comes through, and I hope this inspired you to go and make change in your community. Thank you all very, very much. And Steve, thank you so very much for this opportunity. And let me click over to this just so you've got those contact information pieces again. So, thank you.